Boobs are awesome. That's right. Bet you didn't think this video was going to start with that, did you? Boobies, titties, jigglers, whatever you want to call them, they're just the best things. So are asses, in all shapes and sizes. They're sexy, they're squishy, they're fun. We have no problem with any of these things. In fact, we actually want more of them. We want to expand our horizons beyond just digital jiggling technologies into dong. Yes, dong. In all shapes and sizes and all the colors of the rainbow, we want to liberate the dong and have it hang long and proud in the wonderful world of video games. If adults want to play MMORPGs with each other as just a pile of bouncing pixelated genitals, then inshallah. We say this because today we're going to take an exploration into the dark recess of the internet, into a phenomenon that still continues to this day.
It was a grift, and there are a few players still hanging around.
One that evolves, oddly enough, from a rebellion against representation all the way to being a primary recruitment tool for modern-day Nazis. Some have even suggested that the growth and power of the online alt-right led to the election of the first president memed into existence.
So today, let's take a look at the NPC meme and the idea of meme magic and why this is a tool that's very powerful that the right uses to constantly win. KnowYourMeme.com talks about the origin of the meme, and you can see this person right here is called a Wojak, and this person is an NPC Wojak. The idea is that this person is a blank-faced automaton, and this is an actual human.
However, we're not doing this because we don't want to see beautiful naked people in video games. That's fine. In fact, like we mentioned, we want more #FreeDong. We're just gonna stab that strawman to death before you shut the video off. The rage comments about how this is actually a soy cuck fest of beta male virgins, because joke's on you, internet, we've experienced penetration before. We've also got some more good news. Men are awesome. Don't listen to whatever fake arguments you've heard about the woke scolds who run the left. We love men and agree there are tons of problems that aren't talked about enough in mainstream media. Abhorrently high rates of suicide, overdoses, addiction, and homicides disproportionately affect the male half of the species. We think the patriarchy is shitty for men, and we're going to be frequently talking about how anyone vilifying men as a generality in this tale have been contributing to the problem. Now, make no mistake, the tale of the neckbeards is amongst the most salted and depressing rabbit holes one can go down. But it's an important hole to explore. It's likely you know one or two aspects of this tale, but to see how connected and complex they become is to taste the beard of God. So buckle down and pull out your red suppository, because it's time to mansplain the annals of internet history in
Gamergate. It's a word that conjures up both nostalgia and horror depending on whom you're speaking to. While the story has been told before, it's important to refresh some of the more important parts of it and how the controversy in video game journalism gave way to an online explosion of testosterone and sticky socks.
Like strategy games and shooter games, play them because they love them, not because someone sold them a pink controller or put boobs on a character.
While most people believe it began with Zoe Quinn and their ex-boyfriend's blog post, the origins technically trace back to 2012, with a then relatively unknown Anita Sarkeesian.
But one thing that I've learned from watching a lot of science fiction and fantasy television is you never, ever want to get pregnant on TV.
In May 2012, she launched the Kickstarter campaign to fund the production of a series of videos on tropes versus women in video games.
In addition to being loads of fun to play, research has found that gaming can improve problem-solving skills, teamwork, creative thought and multitasking, and improve hand-eye coordination and enhance perceptual and cognitive abilities.
Asking for only $6,000, she ended up making over 26 times her original goal. Clearly, there was an analytic gap missing when exploring video game plot points and culture, and people were willing to pay for it. The industry was lacking in critical analysis and had already begun focusing on new ways to generate income.
Across the board, microtransaction games report that as soon as a player uses the store once, they're way more likely to monetize again. Many of you may have had this experience with Steam or XBLA. Think about how much inertia it took to get you to download Steam and make your first purchase, or buy your first pack of DLC. Second time came a lot easier, didn't it?
While the early days of Atari and Sierra had female pioneers like Roberta Williams, by 2010, women only accounted for 10% of the video game industry.
It was a trend that started with Nintendo marketing their video game products to boys after the gaming crash of the 1980s.
See Game Boy. It's portable, it's in stereo, and its games are interchangeable. Game Boy comes complete with batteries and the outrageous new game Tetris. And for head-to-head competition, use Video Link and blow your opponent away.
Appearing in the boys, tweens, and in-between sections, gaming and its marketing became associated with men despite also being popular with women. Fast forward to 2012, and Anita produced a series of videos on the numerous sexist elements present in popular gaming franchises from years of generational gendering. And you can imagine the calm, collected, measured response the internet had.
2010, there was a video, I think it was 2010, that the video was recorded in black and white of her in a university giving a speech where she says, "I'm not a gamer. I had to learn a lot about gaming to get into all this." And then come 2012, I mean, that video wasn't released until after she did her Tropes vs. Women in Gaming Kickstarter. May 2012, she starts this Kickstarter, and within the first few days, she starts posting updates on that. I'm being harassed. It's like, well, yeah, people generally react negatively to phenomenal bigots on the internet.
The second half of it is the social justice warriors we mentioned briefly. There is a sort of insurgent move in video games from a couple of wacky left-wing feminists, and these are sort of far-left, Israel-hating, socialist weirdos.
So because of those people, because of the few people threatening them, and by the way, I guarantee you, if the entire gaming community threatened Anita Sarkeesian, good lord, there would not be enough people to count how fast those threats would go up, because the gaming community is massive.
When you send her a message saying, "Hey, Anita, I think you're a bitch," she goes, "Cha-ching."
Ironically, or of course, not even ironically, today we've seen the spin machine that drives the profitability of feminist frequency in full swing, with articles about what a brave survivor she was after facing harassment, which I guess has now gone the way as rape, sexism, and Nazi as words that no longer have any meaning.
You know, and then she runs off to the next interview. She gets paid. I mean, some of her speeches at university, she's been paid 20 grand a speech.
That's hilarious.
I'm not joking, right? And it's just, and for her to go, the internet's being mean to me. Well, maybe if you weren't being a bigot online.
You guys act like only women face harassment online. Constantly feed the trolls. And look, the majority of the people here are trolls because they like to see you freak out about it. And that's exactly what you guys are doing. You're feeding trolls.
Even your language, like freak out about, like no.
So, after the death and rape threats seemed to have maxed out and the dust had settled, Anita Sarkeesian's series certainly exposed one thing: that the video game industry was not prepared to take a critical look at itself. In fact, rather than confront many of the worst aspects of the subculture, it decided to morph and mutate into an entirely new online concept.
The following story is so ridiculous and painful that perhaps the best way to tell it would be to do a scuffed impersonation of the internet historian. It's 2013. Zoe Quinn, an independent game developer, creates and releases the video game Depression Quest. It was an interactive fiction game based upon their own experiences with clinical depression. It was widely praised in indie circles as well as favorably reviewed by critics alike. Fast forward to August 15th, 2014. Shortly after the Steam release of Depression Quest, Quinn's ex-boyfriend, Eron Joni, published a lengthy tirade against Quinn on multiple gaming forums. He accuses them of having cheated on him repeatedly during their brief relationship, Seeing as how this activity had been used frequently in the past by MRI communities online to threaten and harass women, the threads were deleted by the forums. But it's too late. 4chan and Reddit have already got hold of Elon's blog called The Zoe Post, where he accuses a Kotaku writer of exchanging positive coverage of their video game in exchange for sex. The oldest quid pro quo in the book. You see, the core truth at the heart of Gamergate hinged on the assertion that Zoe Quinn had in fact exchanged sex, and yet it was having difficulty proving a single instance of it happening. That was until Nathan Grayson arrived. Gamergaters, who at this point referred to themselves colloquially as Gators, had found their savior in the form of a Kotaku journalist who was strongly rumored to be one of Zoe's partners. Not to be labeled as young or obsessive or frankly deeply resentful of women with no social boundaries, the Gators had a rallying cry of ethics and journalism as their public mantra. Privately, they used codes online such as #burgers and fries, titled after a slut-shaming joke used to spread illegal nude photos of Quinn. All justified, of course, because it was ultimately to fix a broken system. Except it turns out Grayson hadn't actually reviewed Depression Quest at all. Oops. The quest's the salvage ethics was showing itself to be monstrously unethical. 4chan is ecstatic. Finally, the deeply online manosphere had found direct evidence of women achieving favoritism over men due to their looks and their longing desire to corrupt and change the gaming industry as they knew it. And in ways only 4chan knows how to do, they quickly weaponized the online pepes. Soon, Reddit joins the fight, spreading Joni's manifesto, and soon they were enacting justice. Internet justice. They had their game negatively review bombed. They compromised their social media accounts and email, and eventually uncovered nude photos of them that were shared with their friends, family, and employers. As if that wasn't enough atonement for their sins, they would also attack anyone who tried to stand up for them, including Phil Fish, a fellow game developer who had his finances hacked, prompting him to have to sell his company to Polytron Corporation and disappear from the internet entirely. They turned their sights on Zoe's new boyfriend, Alex Lifshitz, claiming he was an alias of Phil Fish. They bombarded his employers, forcing him to resign to save the company's reputation. Eventually, they discovered their home address and doxed it, causing both Alex and Zoe to be effectively homeless for several months. But it was all just another worthy sacrifice in the quest to avenge the high crimes that befell this noble hero of testosterone-laden magnificence. There's just one problem. It didn't happen. Not the harassment and death threats, that all happened to barbaric proportions. We're talking about the manifesto. Zoe Quinn never traded sexual favors for positive reviews of their game. They never did it to try and boost sales or generate more money. Because the game is free. It always was.
It was one of those examples, a very, I think, early example of like a super disingenuous tactic that works, right? It works given the diffuse nature of like the modern internet. You can say something like that, make that kind of a claim to an already receptive audience, and they're not going to go digging for that review necessarily because like the person saying it to them, because they hold similar beliefs, they trust that person. So they're like, okay, yeah, I just believe that that exists and is out there, and as a result, this is like a clear documented instance of corruption. Ideas that like the Trump campaign, for example, would later prey on, like the idea of an elite class that is like lying to you, and is like mega corrupt and is all at once brilliant and bumbling, which is, you know, that's what they did with games journalism, and the Trump campaign just did that with like all of their political opponents. So games journalism has always had ethical issues. They're just not the ones the Gamergaters targeted.
Just put a pin in this for now. We're going to get back to that later.
Like a million no-nut Novembers culminating into a singularity of infinite time and space, Gamergate unveiled an often rumored but seldom seen result of mass male alienation. An entire generation of young men indoctrinated by a society imposing upon them a set of standards which were becoming increasingly difficult to obtain. The first, mostly online generation that had grown up with high-speed gaming and always online subculture, social media, with its highly addictive properties, have been manipulating entire generations of young minds without much critical thought paid to the consequences.
The short-term dopamine-driven feedback loops that we have created are destroying how society works. No civil discourse, no cooperation, misinformation, mistruth. And it's not an American problem. This is not about Russian ads. This is a global problem.
With so much of our daily interactions being spent in front of screens with information filtered almost exclusively by artificial intelligence, the incentivization towards promoting more incendiary or conspiratorial links is only now beginning to be understood in terms of its damaging potential. Now, gamers are not inherently evil people, either for enjoying video games or participating in the subcultures that are derived from them. There is a tendency in the mainstream media when reporting on gaming communities to focus exclusively on the toxic atmosphere that men create.
According to Vossen, the gamers and the alt-right share common ground.
As people who are marginalized are fighting for equality, those who've traditionally had privilege, especially white men, feel that they are being oppressed by these people who are trying to just be treated as equal.
And that ignores two important points. One, that violent and threatening gamers do not make up the majority of players or even fans. And two, that much of the blame for online radicalization or recruiting does fall on a uniquely single factor.
Zardoz speaks to you, his chosen ones. The gun is good.
No, it's not. It's not Zardoz. This is a bit. It's just that there's so many different factors that go into how exactly online radicalization works. It would just like what? No one who isn't 40 is going to understand a fucking thing.
You see, Gamergate was also a YouTube content goldmine that turned many skeptics into men lords. Familiar faces today like Sargon of Akkad, Thunderfoot, Mike Serenovich, Chris Raygun, and even Milo Yiannopoulos.
There's that thing in the men's rights world, the red pilling. You sort of take the red pill, suddenly your eyes are open to the realities of the relationships between men and women and how they should both behave and all the rest of it. I've noticed a similar sort of effect in gamers where they suddenly realise, well, actually, wait. I think it was yesterday I saw a tweet, somebody said, I just watched Fox News and for the first time in my life, it's starting to make sense to me. Right. And of course, a lot of them have been coming to Breitbart to read my stuff. And I think there's obviously an inevitable bleed into elsewhere in the site.
There's an ongoing debate as to how much the content creator influences his audience versus how much their support influences the creator. Many channels who weren't household alt brand names yet had suddenly discovered a digital goldmine. Talking about Gamergate was an internet oil rush that the right had been looking for, and as newly minted member of Breitbart, Milo ran with it, pushing the entire thing directly into the culture wars.
It's true that yes, I'm very sympathetic to the Gamergate side of all of this. I'm just a reporter covering the story.
So let's explore that just in the interest of full disclosure for my audience that's not necessarily keyed in to the minutia of what's going on here.
Ideological consistency is not one of Milo's talents, exemplified by the fact that he had written an article prior to Gamergate, literally the day before the Zoe post was released, about how Elliot Rodgers' murder spree was influenced by violent video games, a popular anti-gaming right-wing talking point. Seeing the excitement a heavily online reactionary mob was having towards Zoe, he knew he had found his calling. Milo's hatred of both the left and feminists.
No. So it was different people on the panel. It wasn't me. Because I had no interest in going to Austin. It's about the only bit of text. This is really good. I swear I'm not doing this. I swear I'm not doing
You got a lot of good points according to the robot.
Found a perfectly harmonized duet in Gamergate that propelled him into stardom.
Everything's great being a woman because I'm a woman. And then suddenly, oh my God, she's oppressed and Patreon this and Patreon.
He would crowdsource or outright plagiarize posts from Kiwi Farms or 8chan and target anyone who opposed Gamergate, which were naturally mostly women. Due to the low quality of his research and writing, Breitbart's legal team would often spend days correcting his slanderous and baseless accusations, regurgitating most of what Gamergaters were posting online about their critics. Alongside him, Carl Benjamin, better known as Sargon of Akkad, the online skeptic community began to overlap with the anti-feminist one. A failed game designer himself, Sargon found a particularly lucrative home in producing content about Gamergate.
I talk to people who do not give a shit about ideological differences. A lot of other people are in the same boat as me. Not everyone is on an ideological crusade. I mean, I am.
Carl's particular hatred of online feminism combined perfectly with his inability to do substantial research into any of the topics he discusses.
It's a fray!
When people say something like, well, the humans provoke them by entering into their habitat, they are assuming that the bugs are merely mindless animals that act on instinct and are not capable of moral decision-making. Rather than informing the Mormon extremists that this planet was actually inhabited, and at least delivering a demand that they leave, the bugs instead massacred them all without mercy. And if this wasn't enough, the bugs then began launching meteor attacks on an unprepared and unsuspecting Earth, with the first attack wiping out nearly 10 million people and destroying a major city. Why do I want this unironically? The answer is because Starship Troopers is a manifesto for Jordan Peterson's utopia.
The success of YouTube Gamergate content led many popular figures to pool in even bigger audiences if they continue to pour gasoline all over the fire that was being created.
Braithwaite has analyzed the particular narrative dimensions of Gamergate technoculture, emphasizing how these feelings of victimization and alienation come into geek masculinity, informed the efforts of Gamergate participants to preserve masculine technological control via online misogyny. In the analysis presented by this paper, the cultural and technological aspects of Gamergate merge within the technological rationality described by Marcuse. Gamergate's abuse campaign became endemic because its underlying rationalities were evident in the design, governance, and communicative culture of a range of online platforms. This is no coincidence. The architecture and administration of those online platforms emanate from the very same geek cultures and related industries as Gamergate. In online abuse, this paper suggests technology is always already symbolically and strategically implicated in assertions of masculine aggression.
Milo Yiannopoulos' tactics of attacking people involved and outright going too far would earn him the reputation of being a joker-fied bad boy in the field.
Dislike the new Ghostbusters movie, or you have the audacity to dislike the work in Hollywood of somebody who happens to be black or happens to be a woman, and then you get suspended?
Especially when he was one of the more prominent early figures to be kicked off the platform.
One day later, Milo Yiannopoulos, a conservative writer for Breitbart.com, was permanently suspended from Twitter.
Meanwhile, weird Mike Serenovich, a man who is known for writing one of the creepiest blogs on the internet, selling a self-help regimen called The Gorilla Mindset, with supplements to go along with it, not to mention falsely accusing anyone he doesn't like of pedophilia.
Mike Cernovich?
Thurnovich. Mike Thurnovich.
Okay, Mike, however you pronounce that. I guess there's a theta at the end.
Had also enjoyed a rising profile thanks to InfoWars' interest in the conspiracy side of Gamergate. After his takedown of Sam Cedar, Serenovich had all but washed away the stigma of his sexual assault accusations and was rebranding as a men's rights hero. He and Jones would eventually begin pushing Pizzagate using techniques and recruitment tools that had been proven successful during Gamergate. While on the other side of the right, things were getting a lot more alternative.
These are typical diversity images. I don't think these would be much surprising to anyone. Essentially, diversity is going to be wonderful. It helps whites. You can have new friends.
Around 2013, the Nazis went online. Hate groups in the US, as tracked by the Southern Poverty Law Center, had been growing in number since the Knots, but between 2012 and 2014, they dropped by almost a quarter. Patriot groups dropped by over a third. However, hate crimes stayed about the same. Radical conservatism was not shrinking, but decentralizing. Still radical and still often violent, but now full of white nationalist nomads unlikely to join a formal organization. This didn't make them harmless. What it did was protect their asses from the typical hate group cycle of getting the public's attention, making allies in conservative media, swelling their numbers, and then eventually disgracing themselves with failures in fighting and, often enough, members committing horrific acts of violence.
Richard Spencer, the Lord of Cringe Lords. The answer to the question, what if cat urine was personified? He's a neo-Nazi parading around as a libertarian nationalist. He rose to prominence for coining the term alt-right, a rebranding of far-right fascist beliefs with a healthy dose of comedic plausible deniability.
How fake it is, which is the idea of meme magic. Yeah.
Right.
You
But
meme
didn't it
things
work?
into reality.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you really think that it's real?
Yes.
Do you have Steve Bannon's ear? Can you call him on the phone?
No. But in terms of meme magic, yeah, I think there is something about, I would call it like a self-fulfilling prophecy. We memed alt-right into existence.
The alt-right successfully co-opted internet culture with the rejection of what they perceived as the progressive or woke shifting of the Overton window. With the rise of Gamergate and the acquisition of Pepe as representation of insular meme culture, the line between those acting out in legitimate racism and those doing it for the lulz was blurred.
I saw it as an opportunity to put an end to these alt-right claims that has been thrown against me. It wasn't to try and clear my name or save grace.
To great utility, the alt-right was capable of unifying rejections of third-wave feminism, critical race theory, trans and gender issues with a heavily alienated generation. A generation that was beginning to be plagued by existential dread towards an unstable economy, climate change, and a continued transfer of wealth from the poorest individuals in society to the richest. Well, I mean, not to mention all the things that teenagers think about. While people like Tucker Carlson were harnessing nationalistic sentiments to an older generation, on the internet it was the YouTubers who dominated the culture war.
Everybody, the media and journalists, everybody is telling us that the problem with Twitter is too much trolling, too much meanness, too much quote-unquote abuse and harassment. I see the problem as exactly the reverse. When Twitter started cracking down on free speech, the platform started failing, and that is the history of social networks. That rule has never been broken in the history of social networks.
Spencer and the alt-right's rise coincided with the presidential campaign of Donald Trump, as did the rise and fall of Pizzagate, and its eventual rebranding.
Pedophiles are raping children in underground dungeons. Are you gonna do nothing? Pizzagate is real. Pizzagate, Comet Pizza isn't a myth. It's some sort of database that lists all this child sex. Starting to think our worst fears weren't bad enough.
Who had become a célébrité du jour amongst alt-right circles, had propelled his minor internet fame into a growing men's rights movement, complete with seminars and supplements on obtaining the guerrilla mindset taken directly from the Alex Jones playbook.
50% off with promo code SUN, S-U-N, at InfoWarsStore.com. It's selling out, 50% off, promo code SUN at InfoWarsStore.com.
When his customers weren't enjoying overpriced vitamins or learning how to get away with sexual assault,
he was actually physically touching me. We have a guy in a gas mask and another person in a mask, and they said they're violent and they want violence.
We've got push and shoving. Let's get in it, Mike.
I love it when they attack you. They're touching me. I'm being assaulted.
they were engaging in Pizzagate, a conspiracy theory made famous thanks to Mike and Alex.
Now, Mike Cernovich, good to have you here.
Oh, my pleasure. We're definitely approaching the singularity because our time is becoming dilated now, where I always ask people, how long ago was it when Kathy Griffin pulled her little ISIS beheading stunt? How long ago was Scaramucci fired? Everything is happening.
Seems like 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. So our time is becoming dilated because we're approaching the singularity.
At a time when the hatred of Hillary Clinton was a blend of justified, war hawkish, Libya, super predators,
to big drug cartels. They are not just gangs of kids anymore. They are often the kinds of kids that are called super predators. No conscience, no empathy. We can talk about why they ended up that way, but first we have to bring them to heel.
rape apologia.
I'm a pretty lousy president.
Mike decided to take down the Clinton empire with the only currency the internet accepted: bad shittery.
You are fraud. You're fraud. This call is over. I'm going to post the audio, obviously, because we both recorded.
I'm going to radio
so
a direct.
You're a fraud. You're a liar. So this is over.
Isolating the word pizza in numerous private emails of Hillary Clinton that were now public knowledge courtesy of WikiLeaks, many corners of the dark web began to suspect that pizza may be in fact code for an international pedophile ring. It had all the trapping of the best conspiracies. A few elements of truth, in this case a verifiable series of emails, and a mountain of completely fabricated bin basket fiction.
People actually believe a conspiracy theory that Hillary Clinton and her former campaign manager, John Podesta, ran a child sex ring at a pizzeria in D.C. This is a lie. We all know the only people who are trapped in a pizza place are those robots at Chuck E. Cheese.
Not that people shouldn't have noticed that this was one of Mike's signature moves.
So now they're saying, oh, you must be melting down and, you know, everything else. But I don't know, like I'm cute. I look cute. Got a little sun. I don't understand. Now,
having performed a few KOs versus James Gunn, Vic Berger, and Sam Cedar, which were eventually reversed when they discovered again to be completely taken out of context and had zero evidence of actual pedophilia. Eventually, enough people took #Pizzagate seriously that someone went into a pizza parlor armed and ready to kill pedophiles he may have identified.
He actually thought initially that he was a staff member because he was walking straight for that back room. Staff member, kind of looked at me and indicated that this was a gunman.
Edgar Welch appearing in court this afternoon.
Pizzagate wasn't a direct one-to-one evolution with Gamergate, although there was significant overlap in the communities thanks to figures like Cernovich being the propagandists promoting both.
the media is claiming that this is because of Pizzagate. This is very dangerous fake news. Anybody claiming that the gunman today at Comet Pizza had anything to do with Pizzagate is lying.
After a firm crackdown on Pizzagate shut down Reddits, Discords, forums, and some legal woes for InfoWars, remnants of the fractured conspiracy theory slowly overlapped with the other side of the culture war in the meme war theater.
Hello ethnic Kyrgyzstanis, this is Big Man Tyrone, Supreme President of Kyrgyzstan, here to brief you on a special mission for all battle-ready meme warriors.
Pepe, the lovable frog in Kyrgyzstan, a subculture built around the World of Warcraft word for LOL or LOL, that fused with an ancient Egyptian frog god Kek. Just bear with us, okay? This is the internet, it's not exactly going to be like the Battle of Gettysburg. Memes became the currency in the online culture wars. Belonging to a certain group like an alt-right community in 4chan was also so anonymous that the ability to demonstrate belonging came in the relevance and efficacy of memology. To this effect, the creativity and diversity of Pepe memes grew in both their scale and racism. There was also a belief online that the memes themselves had the ability to manipulate life itself. While they were certainly in the minority, the biggest upset in modern political history did lend some life to the magical powers of the internet. Remember how we said Milo Yiannopoulos had capitalized heavily on the Gamergate movement and pushed it into a key talking point of the conservative culture wars? Well, that wasn't by accident. It was by design.
As America was gearing up for an election, Donald Trump was apparently making a deal with the devil, according to Joshua Green. And the devil's name was Steve.
They think you're a big, powerful man who will bring an end to their way of life and all life on Earth.
Am I really that powerful?
Of course I am.
Vaughn Bannon of House Harkonnen has a really weird story, explained in the book Devil's Bargain, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump, and the Storming of the Presidency. He made his early wealth through the licensing rights to Seinfeld by negotiating a deal on behalf of Ted Turner. He then got Goldman Sachs to invest in video game mining, and no, we don't mean that kind. This was way before Bitcoin. We're talking about gamers playing games like World of Warcraft for hours just collecting gold so they can sell it off for real cash in the real world. It was a highly lucrative business until tens of thousands of gamers rose up and raged at people cheating at something they had worked so hard to accomplish themselves. They organized digitally on forums and collectivized until they actually forced multi-billion-dollar major corporations like Blizzard to put an end to the gold mining in World of Warcraft. While bruised, but not defeated, Bannon learned the power of the quote,
rootless white males who spend all their time online.
5 years later, when he joined Breitbart, he immediately began working on hiring those rootless men to radicalize the masses into populism. He had been an independent documentarian, if you want to use that term in the loosest possible sense, meaning not at all, and was interested in transforming online activism into something that could take shape in the real world.
Bannon refers to it as
the Third World War, the longest global conflict in history.
Bannon is saying that there wasn't a Cold War. There was a real war that the Soviets started, but that most Western leaders didn't want.
Milo Yiannopoulos bridged that gap and was one of the major assets to transfer the Gators into Pepes and eventually into MAGAs. Milo is already positioned as one of Bannon's top culture warriors and was also beginning to talk about other conspiracy theories that would help cross-pollinate the groups. The big enemies that were targeted were third-wave feminists and social justice warriors who dyed their hair into neon furry expressions of soy.
Surprise, motherfucker. Free TK, free Palestine. You ain't this shit, TK. What's a few lies and you got bars?
Outrage, the mere thought of being outraged, they were a scourge on the internet, demanding that everything be censored and no one have fun. While various corners of the right-wing circle would attack them in the form of YouTube rants and college eviscerations, hatred of liberals, Democrats, and their associations with a globalist pedophile cabal had taken a life of its own.
Donald Trump's victory shocked the world. Every poll and data point and projection was showing Hillary Clinton to be a sure thing. US imperialism was secured. Then an outsider came along to drain the swamp. By outsider, of course, we mean that he wasn't a hardline Republican favorite.
Get back in the business of creating a more peaceful world. Please clap.
He was still a rich elite that had no sign of changing. But he was crass and open about his nationalism and uncomfortable love for the country. A reality TV showman who was beloved by a cult-like following and the jingoistic power of a monster truck. Trump's presidency played out pretty much exactly as bananas as you'd expect. But even more shocking was the mutation taking place from Pizzagate into the final boss of conspiracy theories, the Shang Tsung, if you will. One that combined multiple other favorites through the years, like evil cabal of Jewish bankers, evil cabal of Jewish media, Illuminati, rich elite families, mostly Jewish, secret cannibal cult of pedophiles, evil government conspiracies and collusion, and of course, the most evil being in history, George Soros. And that's not even the most batshit part. Hinging at the center of this was Donald Trump being the savior of humanity, working behind the scenes with a top-level informant named only Q, who spoke oddly like someone had been reading Alice in Wonderland on ketamine.
Mockingbird. HRC detained, not arrested, yet. Where is humor? Follow humor. This has nothing to do with Russia, yet. Why does POTUS surround himself with generals? What is military intelligence? Why go around the three-letter agencies? What Supreme Court case allows for the use of MI versus congressional assembled and approved agencies? Who has ultimate authority over our branches of military without approval conditions unless 90+ in wartime conditions? What is the military code? Where is AW being held? Why? POTUS will not go on TV to address nation. POTUS must isolate himself to prevent negative optics. POTUS knew removing criminal rogue elements as a first step was essential to free and pass legislation. Who has access to everything classified? Do you believe HRC, Soros, Obama, etc. have more power than Trump? Fantasy. Whoever controls the office of the presidency controls this great land.
This is QAnon? He rarely states specific facts.
QAnon was not a monolith, and it overlapped with numerous individuals who were either devout believers or happy to be part of a decentralized cult. Roger Stone, while not allowed to share the president's inner grace anymore, was a firm believer arguably until this day. Seeing as he's an opportunist in most other respects, it's also entirely plausible he enjoys the myth more than the man. Now, Q as a story is way too vast on its own to even remotely tackle here. We'd recommend watching Cullen Hoback's incredibly thorough documentary, Q Into the Storm, that exposes the entire history of the movement, including possibly outing Q himself. It's hard to overstate how far this whole thing went from being an obscure online theory to being Instagrammed by the president's family and his inner circle. Combined with Trump eventually lying that the election was stolen, the whole thing was perfectly positioned to reach a critical peak.
Common swamp creatures! We're coming for all you commie traitors in Congress that have stabbed us in the back. USA! 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 USA!
The dust had settled on the capital. The glass repaired, the families have grieved. The culmination of so many different groups united together by a common thread, or post, or retweet. We've seen what the radicalization of a single individual on the internet can do in terms of causing damage in the real world, but never in numbers this large. Most cults or religions met in real life, trained in real life. Or more importantly, they knew they were part of a collective group taking orders from a hierarchy. Q may have been that hierarchy, but he was still anonymous. And what people decided to do with that information was polished by outside agents.
Going to affirm the massive landslide of Donald J. Trump? Are we going to turn over a constitutional republic to the forces of, what did Vigano say, the forces of darkness? See through in the fog of war is to have clarity. It's to have clarity that January 6th was going to be the day, or one of these big days, and you had to converge everything down to January 6th.
You could point the finger at the corporations for allowing it to grow to such dangerous proportions, specifically big tech, who knew well before it gotten out of control that it was going to be a problem. You could blame some of the adolescent gamers whose rootless rage was manipulated into revolutionary action once they had grown up. You could say it was those who vilified every single gamer as if they were a misogynist or a racist.
There was also all these accusations of sexism and homophobia.
Yeah. Like if you didn't toe a line, you were a misogynist, you were a sexist. And suddenly, like, the people that we have been reading for like years at this point, we're saying like, hey, you know, you fans who've been reading us forever, you're sexist, you're misogynist, probably racist. And it was just like, what is happening?
You could say it was the crony corruption between the publishers and AAA game producers, selling reviews and throwing journalism out the window. You could say it's the mods or the programmers behind 4chan who allowed so many conspiracies to flourish. You could say it was the pundits and influencers who spread the idea to the masses. You could say it was the politicians who embraced this new cult-like approval of their strongman, or perhaps even the president himself cheering them on. But what really lies at the core of all this? After the shooting in Columbine, both parents and politicians began to scramble to determine what could have caused such an atrocity.
Would enjoy blowing your opponent's head off is a problem.
I bought this game because it contains the blood and violence that was represented in the arcade version.
And violent video games became the focus. Titles like Night Trap and Doom and Mortal Kombat were seen as so grotesque that they were actually infecting children's minds, when actual studies and research revealed something completely different.
My personal sense, having spent countless hours mowing down aliens, monsters, sometimes even literal Nazis in various games, is that video games themselves, even action or violent ones, don't radicalize a person or cause them to become violent or aggressive. But one of the core lessons from psychology is that sometimes our gut instinct can be wrong. So, what does the literature say? I couldn't find anything, published literature-wise, linking video games to extremism, radicalization, or other things of that nature. Now, me not finding it doesn't mean it's not there. But given the ongoing moral panic about video games that's practically as old as I am, and the abundance of studies arguing for a link between violent or action video games and aggression, I would have expected to have at least stumbled across a mention of it if it were there. What I did find was an examination of US youth violence and general homicide rates compared against movies and video games. And there was a stretch of time in the mid-20th century where there was a small-ish correlation between movie violence and homicide rates, but eventually that reversed. And for violent video games, there's a negative correlation between youth violence rates and video games and video game releases, especially violent ones, where you see a release and there is a decrease in youth violence. So if anything, it seems that violent media is actually reducing real-world harm, not increasing it.
So, was everything about Gamergate a lie? Of course not. I mean, there was so many competing groups and ideologies and pent-up frustration that at the time nearly everything became hyperpolarized. Luckily, that's no longer the case in modern society. The Gators were completely correct, for example, that Anita Sarkeesian didn't come from a gamer background.
It's a soundtrack of one song, except I'm doing video games.
So it's not exactly a fandom. I'm not a fan of video games. I actually had to learn a lot about video games in the process of making this.
So she was effectively an outsider critiquing a group that saw it as an attack. She didn't get everything correct in her analysis, like the fact, for example, that Hitman doesn't actually require you to murder a sex worker to get through a level. You're in fact punished if you complete the mission that way. And there is absolutely a monstrous problem with the relationship between video game companies and reviewers, just not in the way you think.
There's always been far too close of a relationship between like games press and PR, for example. So you have, with games journalism, like if you're going to review a game or whatever, or like get early access to it, you're probably going through PR people. There would be pretty clear conflicts of interest going into like people's coverage of games. And that's just like by design. And it also, over the years, I think bred a pretty subservient press.
AAA game companies today are massive corporations that spend huge budgets on developing software. Their flagship series need to generate even larger returns for their business models to make sense. To this aim, they force their employees to work excessive hours in a process known as the crunch in order to meet deadlines. They also spend very large amounts of money on advertising directly on the very magazines and websites that will be reviewing their titles later. When gaming outlets such as Kotaku take a journalistic approach to reporting on game companies, either on their abysmal treatment of workers or insider accounts of development troubles, they can be met with a blacklisting, as was the case with Bethesda.
A type of game we'd never done before. Had a lot of difficulties at launch, and we got
a lot of well-deserved criticism.
Or the case of the Dead Effect 2 developer who leaked that they had formed a blacklist in a direct response to negative reviews of the game. Most large publications will get early copies of a game so they can review its contents to time exactly with the release of a title, but reviewing a game negatively could potentially lose you that privilege, allowing your competitors who aren't as savage to gain a legitimate advantage. If we're being honest, capitalism, and more specifically the endless pursuit of higher quarterlies, has destroyed so much of what made the early video game industry incredible. Massive multiplayer games with microtransactions, DLCs that don't include what you should have paid for in the first place, or bloated collector edition sets, free-to-play games whose profit motive lie in using the exact same techniques as casinos. And most importantly, the never-ending shopping for aesthetics that used to be included with your original purchase.
This is a fantasy. This is not reality. And I don't believe people could punch somebody's head off if they tried.
I know, it's a wild concept. You spend over $50 on a game and you get the whole game at once. So then the other question remains. Were Gamergaters all incels, or at the very least misogynists? There is no question there was, and still is, a large amount of individual actors engaged in behavior like online bullying, hate speech, doxing of multiple figures, death threats, rape threats, and swatting. The fact that they were largely anonymous and connected globally 24/7 fueled the scale of abuse. Many of the points raised in feminist frequency regarding the industry were salient and often unspoken ones.
It's no secret that fighting games often feature sexualized female characters, and often feature characters whose design is rooted in ethnic stereotypes. Sometimes these two elements combine in sexualized, exotified female characters. In Street Fighter IV, Elena wears, well, she wears almost nothing. But the bands that she wears on her arms, legs, and neck vaguely suggest African tribal culture, and she possesses that stereotypical character trait of a mystical connection to the earth.
I'll show you my dance. You ready?
But to the original question, no, of course not. The problem comes in when people attempt to simply draw a line through each one of these phenomena like they're a natural linear evolution of each other, whereas the whole thing is closer to a web with many overlapping pieces and characters who along the way learned that they can manipulate it all for their own nefarious purposes. And the worst part about all this is that the whole thing is a sleight of hand. What I mean to say is that secret pedophile cabals, or elite liberal pizza enthusiasts, or even women and non-binary gaming journalists are not what are actually threatening men. If you look at the current leading causes of death in men, it's first accidental death, a category that combines drug overdoses and car accidents. Now, the leading cause of overdoses is from opioids, and the epidemic that swept across North America started in large part because pharmaceutical companies like Purdue Pharma incentivized doctors to push their products.
The company, one of the three brothers who originally took it over,
would regularly be asking for sales reports. He would be coaching people on how they should go out and push OxyContin to doctors. When you started having people dying of overdoses, he is very involved in emails saying, look, the way we're going to spin this is that it's about drug addicts. These people are criminals. This is not our problem.
Blaming the victims.
Blaming the victims, absolutely.
On top of which, many of the biggest names in the game spend more money on advertising than they do on R&D. Massive corporations like Walmart and Walgreens were accused of ignoring red flags or addictions and fueling the crisis. Next is suicide, and the leading causes are mental illness, something that the US healthcare system is not adequately addressing.
Then in 1988, President Reagan slashed federal mental health spending by 25%. So where do people end up? For a lot of them, jail. In 2012, there were 10 times as many mentally ill people in prisons and jails than in state hospitals, and close to 400,000 adults with untreated mental illness are in jails. In effect, prisons are the new mental institutions.
With number 7 being unemployment and number 8 being social isolation. Another large unspoken problem is our addiction to social media, programmed to keep users on them for as long as possible and reinforced with AI that continues to promote more incendiary content. And we keep going back to this. The profits to shareholders are more important than the health of people.
Facebook surveyed its own systems and found many levers where there were many possible ways they could have been set. And Facebook found that the setting that had been used before, which was optimized for hypergrowth, was potentially dangerous.
So we doom scroll and we hate post, and we don't feel any more fulfilled for doing either. If you're watching this and you're conservative, you may have come into it with a bias knowing we skew left, just as we would have done the same had we been watching a conservative documentary, which all naturally tends to serve those in power, profiting off all of our social interactions. So let's recap. Gamergate was provoked by 2 key incidents that grew into an internet subculture that directly targeted multiple groups. Milo Platypus, under the guise of Steve Bannon, was quick to weaponize the phenomenon and turn it into a mainstream culture war. Mike Cernovich at the time became known as the, quote, based lawyer, who approached Gamergate from a legal perspective and rapidly became one of the Gators' heroes. He garnered so much attention that he stopped practicing law to become a full-time men's rights advocate, with pills to boot. He was also a key figure in shifting the online anger towards a new conspiracy theory called Pizzagate. Milo also began promoting Pizzagate once it became popular, going as far as even lying publicly in a speech in LA that he had insider information on it being verified at the highest levels of government.
We are going to talk this evening about a few things that are close to my heart, Milo told his audience. Although I have one announcement to make, which is that sadly, when I announced that I was going to be speaking about Pizzagate this evening, I got a number of phone calls with Washington, D.C. area codes saying, "Not yet."
Eventually, Bannon became the president's chief strategist and rode the wave of patriotism through QAnon all the way to the insurrection itself. This whole story ends up being less about a singular event, but more about the evolution and mutations of online outrage being synthesized and funneled into real-life action. The media ran around, and still runs to this day, like a headless chicken, furiously trying to keep up and only observing small pieces along the way. Anyone who's cashed in on the process can have plausible deniability.
It really is. It's a magician's trick.
That they never personally advocated for hate speech, or revenge porn, or doxing, or even calls to violence, even if the effects of their work result in it. Jeremy. Oh, wait. Did we forget to mention Jeremy Hambley?
Bonus round.
In 2021, on a podcast with all the biggest names in outrage porn, the Quartering explained firsthand how lucrative the moral panic over Star Wars The Last Jedi had been.
We gained 200,000 subscribers during the Fallout 76 debacle. Another 100,000 during the Battlefield 5 debacle. We all gained big during The Last Jedi, right? And there hasn't been something like that for us. The closest we had in the last year was Kevin Smith's He-Man. But like, there hasn't been a big push in the last year. And if there isn't another one next year to kind of refresh viewership, I've already kind of started planning my exit plan. So I'm maximum grift. I mean, you got a mobile game you want me to talk about? Just email me. I'm in.
How profitable and lucrative it was, and worries that they'll never get another gold rush like that. For those unfamiliar, Jeremy's the host of The Quartering, the popular right-wing pop culture channel on YouTube. He's come a long way from being kicked out of Magic the Gathering for harassment,
because this video does not show I doxed any female cosplayers. What this is, okay, is a tweet. Not one that I made.
Magnify that death spear.
Now Hannah is spreading false information. I was not banned for harassment. I never was. It was Pepe memes and mild banter with another creator. Now apologize as you have received evidence.
Magnify that death spear. Why is it still blurry?
Yeah, I'm not going to sexualize you. I mean, fuck me if I'm going to say that I wish there was a little slot down here, you know, for me to, you know, for us to pleasure each other, you know, because that's not what your intent is. I mean, oh yeah, look, totally non-sexual here. I mean, who would in their right mind ever make a comment about your cosplay giving them an erection? Because fuck you, like, you know, 13, 14, 15-year-old kid that doesn't have social skills. Please, everyone on the internet, come and support CS Sprinkle Run on Twitter and let her know how totally unattractive and unsexual she looks, and maybe she will avoid these digital rapes.
Exposed for his numerous transphobic, racist, and homophobic comments.
Trans people always get lumped in with women, and for example, and people of color, okay? But in my opinion, from a biological standpoint, they're still male. A boyish looking lesbian takes this and turns it into this? You mean to tell me that there's not some agenda there?
Trying to shield himself by saying he has 2 gay black dads, being exposed for revealing his father is in fact white, only to double down and say his biological father is in a gay polycule with his other 2 gay black dads.
My family is none of your business, and it's really shocking to see how openly phobic you are. Hope you enjoyed this video. We'll talk to you again real soon.
To pumping the outrage button on every woman or minority who ever finds themselves in a lead role. And let's not forget Brie Larson.
A lot of people said, hey, you made 20 videos on Brie Larson. Are you obsessed? No. I was giving the people what they wanted. And because of that, look at what Brie sent me. A beautiful Brie shed.
See, this is the shed. This is the Brie shed he bought to taunt her.
While currently making a living off trying to fuel the very same animosity towards women and non-binary gaming journalists, he's also simultaneously upset how anyone would suggest that he had anything to do with Gamergate.
My very first video on this channel is from 2017. 3 full years after the peak, 2 years after the valley, and several years after anyone ever cared about this.
Jeremy, no one is accusing you of creating Gamergate. You cultivated an audience using the very same form of moral panic. In fact, you even tried to bring it into the Magic the Gathering scene before you were kicked out.
A lot of things have been coming to light for me in the past couple of weeks, really past couple months, and it's the shocking similarities between what's going on in Magic the Gathering, how it parallels with a lot of the core issues of Gamergate.
And he's not alone. Conservatives will continue to push whatever talking point is either the most politically effective or, from a content creator's side, the most lucrative.
This is one of these things where I've realized sometimes we all want to think that we can sort of get a story and understand the story. And I want to think that I can sort of read enough about something that I can understand it and explain it in a kind of simple way. This is one of these things that just goes beyond everything. It is truly a rabbit hole of information and misinformation, and one of these things where you can't make everybody happy. I really, at this point, the more I know about it, the less I actually know.
Liberals will continue to either enable or ignore the systems that foster inequality, while the media plays catch-up or ignores what's really happening until it's too late. When I was young, I used to take every part-time job I could get my hands on, whether it was mowing the neighbor's yard or cleaning their dishes or something like that, just to put together a few dollars to buy a new game or a console. I would end up getting something like the Game Gear, and then I would collect every game I could for that system, and then I would sell the whole thing and get a Nintendo with just one game and do it all again for the Super Nintendo, and then the Genesis, and then the 64, and PlayStation, Saturn. I even had an Atari Jaguar at one point. And that ended up coinciding with a time that was really bad in my life, where, you know, most of my peers in high school would be partying on a Friday night. I would just be sitting at home trying to pull the sword out in Secret of Mana, or running around terrified of the Pyramid Head in Silent Hill 2. And if someone had come up to me and told me that the only thing in my life at that time that was making me happy was wrong, or evil, or made me misogynist or racist just for enjoying it, I honestly would have told them, fuck you. So I get it. I really do. What?
I mean, like, what am I doing here? What are we doing? Like, I'm just standing next to you awkwardly this close while you just go off on some crazy unhinged diatribe?
I thought it would make more sense for like...
What do you mean make sense? Like, am I not a man? Can I not speak?
Semblance of stability so I could actually work on stuff and move on would be great. And I don't know, I don't think I can stop. And I think the simple fact of the matter for me is I love games more than they hate me.
What is this? Like we're 2 feet apart. I'm just standing here awkwardly while you just go off on some like crazy rant about like what are we doing? What am I here? Why am I bothering you?
I don't know. I thought this would work better.
Am I not a man? Can I not speak? Do I not have a voice? He has a voice.